The Moonrise meta is now here, and with its first tournament having come and gone, we know what some of the best decks are now. And while making a video on the top 8 deck list of the tournament, it got me thinking, what would happen if I just threw some of the best decks together? So I did that. Introducing 24-Hour Beatdown. To start off the deck, we have 3 copies of Pharaohgeist. Pharaohgeist is a 9/13 lunar and solar elestral that says this Pharaohgeist cannot be destroyed in battle and cannot be returned to hand by opponents' card effects. Opponents must also expend 1 in order to cast cards. That means literally anything. Elestrals, runes, it doesn't matter. They're paying 1 in order to cast it, so everything costs a minimum of 2 with Pharaohgeist on the field. This thing is so strong. Before it ever saw competitive play, it was limited because they saw the potential with the next card I'm about to show you, which is 2 copies of Lunar Phase Full Moon. This is a 1-cost lunar counter rune that says enchant up to 2 lunar to an elestral on your field. Now at first this looks very unassuming and like it's not a big deal. However, that makes literally every single elestral able to be a Pharaohgeist because you simply enchant them with 2 lunar and then you can properly enchant the 3rd solar when you go over and ascend into Pharaohgeist. That's why Full Moon is extremely powerful. Not only that, you can also use it to shut down cards like Resting on Your Laurels because they'll fizzle out if their target is not viable. So use Full Moon to enchant the targeted elestral and give them more spirits, and the Resting on Your Laurels will fizzle out. There's also many other ways that Full Moon is very useful and an extremely strong card that is a sneak card in the meta. In order to help us find our Full Moon, we'll be playing 2 copies of Werepup. A 3/2 lunar elestral that says when you normal cast this Werepup, you can search your deck for a lunar phase and add it to your hand. When you cast a lunar phase Full Moon, you can special ascend this Werepup to a Like Void from your hand or deck. So you can always utilize Full Moon as a combat trick in order to special ascend from Werepup into your Like Void mid-combat and having your opponent destroy themselves on your ascended elestral. And speaking of, we'll be playing 1 copy of Like Void. A 6/2 2-drop lunar elestral that says this Like Void deals piercing damage and is unaffected by counter runes if you've cast Lunar Phase Full Moon this turn. So you can always utilize it as a combat trick on the opposite end by ascending into it to make sure that your opponents can't use counter runes on it. Not only that, but Like Void also beats over defense position rabbits and deals piercing damage, so people can no longer just simply sit in defense with Like Void as a possibility. Next, we'll be playing 2 copies of Spectaris. While we have moved into a sort of big guy meta, Spectaris is still relevant because a lot of the smaller guys that are played still heavily rely on their ability, so being able to suppress them, give yourself an additional attack, and walk over them is extremely strong right now. The next Celestial we'll be playing is 2 copies of Nobby. Nobby is a 4/1 lunar elestral that says when this Nobby receives 1 or more lunar spirits, you can give each elestral that is not lunar or solar enchanted -2 attack until the end phase. When this Nobby destroys an elestral in battle, we can special ascend it into Doppelganger from your hand or deck. Now we really don't care about the fact that we can ascend into Doppelganger with this deck because we're not playing it. However, its first part of its ability is fantastic due to the fact that every single elestral with the exception of 1 in this deck is either lunar or solar. And also you can pair this with Full Moon in order to make a combat trick yet again. Next, let me introduce you to copies 2 and 3 of Pharaohgeist in the form of First Light. First Light is a 1-cost solar invoke rune that says search your deck for a solar elestral and put it on the top of your deck. This is the best way to consistently find Pharaohgeist that I've seen. Playing the Comalis and Nexusing line is just kind of inconsistent due to the fact that you have to have spirits on board and also you have to find your Comalis, then you have to Nexus from it. First Light, you simply just play it out and next turn you are guaranteed to have Pharaohgeist in hand. Pharaohgeist always forces people to play weird anyways, so just the threat of having it in hand is extremely strong. And also, First Light pairs with our next card, which is 2 copies of Cockray. Cockray is a 4/1 solar celestial that says this Cockray cannot be suppressed. When you activate First Light, you can special ascend this Cockray to Drakeray from your hand or deck. So not only will we be able to consistently find our Pharaohgeist by playing our First Light, we're also making sure that we have an additional use for it in the fact that it can turbo out a Drakeray. Drakeray is a 7/3 solar and fire celestial that says when you cast this Drakeray, you can return up to 3 solar from your underworld to your spirit deck. During your draw phase, you can expend 1 fire in order to special ascend this Drakeray into Dragalis from your deck. Now, we're not playing Dragalis, but the fact that we can easily turbo into Drakeray while searching out our Pharaohgeist is extremely strong, and we can also heal up 3 spirits in the meantime. Plus, we're putting a big beater on the board. Now, one thing to look out for is the fact that Spoiled Fruit will absolutely wreck this card. So if you can, you might want to try to side out of this package in the second and third games. If we already have our Pharaohgeist in hand, we want to have other valuable solar celestials that we can use First Light to search out, so that way it's just not a dead card. So we'll be playing 2 copies of Lumaru. Lumaru is a 5/2 solar celestial that says when this Lumaru destroys an opponent's celestial in battle, that opponent must send the top 3 cards of their deck to the underworld. In game plan decks that aren't Morfrost or Self-Mill, this can be very impactful in sending critical celestials to their underworld. Not only that, its 5 body is extremely good for gooding over the smaller celestials that are currently being played in order to turbo into the bigger celestials. We'll also be playing 2 copies of Calfmel, a 3/4 solar celestial that says when you ascend this Calfmel or it's destroyed, you can return up to 3 spirits in any combination of solar and lunar from your underworld to your spirit deck. Now that's a majority of what we're playing, so Calfmel essentially acts as an ambrosia. Let alone if you ascend over it with a Drakeray, that's 6 spirits that you're recouping. That is over 25% of your life. Calfmel is an extremely strong card in this deck that I would not overlook. And the final celestial in the deck is 3 copies of Aster Rabbit. Aster Rabbit is still an extremely strong consistency piece, even though there are a lot of celestials that are being played that can beat over it now. The fact that you can just play it and search the top 3 cards of your deck and pick the one that's most advantageous for the situation should never be slept on. To start off the runes that we haven't already talked about in the deck, we'll be playing 2 copies of Temple of the Moon. Now, Temple of the Moon is a lot stronger than most other stadiums due to Full Moon being a card. The fact that you can simply add 2 spirits essentially means, as long as Temple of the Moon is out, you can always just randomly add +2/+2 to one of your elestrals, making Temple of the Moon extremely valuable in this deck. Now, the rest of the runes are pretty typical, so I'm not going to use too much time explaining it, but we'll be starting off with 1 copy of Earthquake. Earthquake is unconditional removal, that as long as you have the Spirit Room, you might as well always play, because it's the only unconditional removal card in the entire game so far. We'll also be playing 1 copy of Resting on Your Laurels. This is extremely cheap removal that can be utilized to come back from bad situations. And our final invoke rune is 3 copies of Ambrosia. Ambrosia is one of the strongest cards in the game due to the fact that everything in the game costs your life in order to play. So healing is always extremely strong, and Ambrosia is always viewed as a 3-of in every single deck. To start off the counter runes, we'll be playing 3 copies of Gorgon's Gaze. This is here to shut down anything that an opposing celestial might want to do. Next, we'll be playing 3 copies of Poison Tipped Arrow. This is going to be extremely relevant for the -2 attack to save a lot of our lower elestrals, and also for the hard removal on the bigger elestrals. Next, we'll be playing 2 copies of Altar of Stars. Now, this is an extremely strong card in this deck, even though we're not playing a lot of Nexus Banks, due to the fact that we should have extra spirits with playing Full Moon. Not only that, Altar of Stars can actually serve as a combat trick because it's the bottom part says you can change the position of an Elestral, not you have to change the position of an Elestral. So you can always pair this with either a Nobby in order to have an opponent's Elestral run face first into it, or you can pair it if, say, you have Temple of the Moon, you can give your Elestral +1 attack and ensure that yours doesn't die if they're attempting to crash. Altar of Stars is extremely versatile in the way that it can be played, and if you're not already, I would add this into your list. And to finish off the main deck, we'll be playing 2 copies of Tsunami. This is extremely strong for allowing us to delay for a single turn in order to ascend over some of our Elestrals, and also considering the fact that Like a Void has piercing, we can always utilize Like a Void in combination with Tsunami to easily deal a lot of damage. And for the Spirit deck, we'll be playing 1 Vipyro for our Drake Arrays, 2 Terratlas for our Earthquake, 2 Leviathan for our Tsunamis and a possible misenchant, 2 Zaptors for our Aster-Rabbit, 5 Luminate for the solar portion of our deck, and 8 Owloon for the rest of it. What do you guys think of the deck? Is this something you would play? Let me know down in the comments below, and let me know if you're interested in seeing any specific decks. If you enjoyed this content, God damn.